Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I'm going to be revisiting one of my older pieces from almost 5 years ago. There'll be a picture popping up of one version of it here, as well as another version popping up over here. I had done it twice, I think maybe 3 months apart from each other, and it's just, I don't know, it kind of evolved a bit. So I'm really excited to revisit it now, years later, because I do feel like I've grown a bit more as a wire wrapper, and I'm excited to see how it might have evolved even further. Fortunately, the components I'm using are very durable, as I keep throwing things on the ground almost every video now. But I'm going to be using this keyhole and this key. And I think it's either Tim Holtz or Jim Holtz, or I don't know. But links to all the different tools and materials will be listed down below. So let's get started. So here I have just a little piece of wax paper. You could use computer paper or whatever you have. And I'm going to do a quick outline of the key component, or the keyhole component. And this way, if you have a differently shaped component, you could do whatever you want and then kind of build and design around it. I also have just this little circle cookie cutter that I use in polymer clay, and I wanted to use that to try to help myself get symmetrical circles. So you could also use, if you wanted a larger circle, you could use your wire spool. And so I want to line up the points where it's crossing, just lining up on the center point and then right there. Because again, symmetry with a heart I feel like is pretty important, unless you're going very specifically for an asymmetrical look. Downside of wax paper, or freezer paper, it likes to curl back up on itself. And so we're going to start with this kind of shape. And we're actually going to end up not having the keyhole quite so high. We're going to have the keyhole be much closer down, like right there. And you could have it wherever you like. Again, I do these tutorials more as a guide to be like, well, this is what I did, and this is what we could do. These are some other options as well, and then you can kind of pick and choose and go from there. So now I'm going to continue this circle down and around. So our circle may end up being much more like not quite as together. It might be opened up more. I'm going to be using one long piece of 16 gauge aluminum wire, and we'll put a fold in the center of it, like a little almost 90-degree bend in the center, and then train the wire around and have another bend right there where it then comes around and opens back up. See how that works? And we'll probably have this side finish in a little spiral. Comes around, come down, and I'm going to try to maintain the distance between the two wires on each side. And so, I mean, it shows them overlapping, but whenever we're wrapping it, we'll just have those sides butt up against each other. And so I'm going to start with the frame, and then get some wire and get it laid out on this, and then I will be right back. So this aluminum wire that we're going to be using, or rather that I'm going to be using, is quite soft. And I've cut 2 feet of it, which should be more than plenty to be able to accomplish our design here. On one of the renditions of this piece, I'd actually done a little bit of like a leaf drop off the bottom. And while I really kind of liked that, I didn't like how it crossed right there at the base. It gave some depth to the piece that I didn't much care for. So I'm going to try to recreate that, but in a way that they'll just be butted up against each other. Like that, as opposed to crossing. And then I'll be doing kind of a figure 8 weave, so there'll be some coiling there, and then the wire will be weaving around. And then I'll probably do some looping right there. Doing a loop or 2 around this section between those 2 little bumps. And then, I don't know, maybe splice it up one of the sides or something. And then I'll probably start, I don't know, we'll go from there. So that's going to be our first step though. So to do that, I'm going to find the middle of our wire. Now I've bent it one way. I'm going to zoom back out so y'all get the full experience of this. I'm just gripping it here and then bending against the curve. And we could use a pen or a paintbrush as a mandrel. I'll just use this pencil that I have here. And I'm just kind of shaping out. I like the little flare that it gives to the tip by having bent against the curve. And so, and I said I wasn't going to do a cross, but there's a cross there right now. But I'm going to be using that as a reference point and lining my pliers up. The edge of my pliers are lined up with the edge of that top wire. And then doing just about another 90-degree bend. So I'm going to come around, I'm going to do that same thing on the other side. Place and bend outward. And so this is going to help us to achieve this shape. And so before going too much further, I'm going to go ahead and do the wrapping on this. Now also, we'll want to keep in mind, I'm going to be having a drop coming off of the very tip here, so I don't want that part to be woven too densely, or at least in a way that I won't be able to push like a needle tool through there and open it up enough to attach a ring. And also, I may decide to incorporate a little gemstone down there at the bottom too. I'm using 4mm and 6mm garnets in this piece. And so I'm going to be using, I gave myself some different options. I didn't know if I'd want to use 26 or 28 gauge, and I didn't know if I'd want to use silver or titanium colored silver plated wire. I think I'm going to like the look of the titanium. It'll give us a nice contrast to the bright, shiny aluminum, as well as a contrast between our shiny silver beads and our antiqued looking lock and key component. So I'm going to do a full arm span. And when I mean that, I mean it's like my arms spread to their full wingspan from one hand to the other. And snip. And to start us off, I'm just going to come all the way down here on the end, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rotations. And this is not an exact science. Words are hard. And then I'm just kind of training that tail down. Also, not gonna lie, 28 gauge wire is much easier on my hands than the 26 gauge, and there's going to be quite a bit of weaving, so I don't mind a bit going with a thinner, more delicate wire. Okay, so we have our coils, and then I'm just going to slide it down. You don't want to have done them too tightly or they won't go through, they won't go over this little hump here. So I'm just using my fingernail to kind of help it along, and then again using my fingernail to kind of help it along. Then once we get it centered up over the tip, I'm just going to push a bit, try to keep it symmetrical. And so I'm exiting around on the back side, so I'm going to come around here. You can see doing a little bit of a figure 8, and then I'm going to wrap. That's one full rotation, and then around so that it makes 2 little bumps. And then again, I'm exiting on the back side, so I'm going to wrap around to the front, and then 1 full rotation, and then back around. And that weave there acts to stabilize the wire, because if I just did the 1 and then swung back around, there's nothing there really holding it down. It's just looped around the edge. Oops, sorry, I keep hitting the tripod with my wires. Whereas if we do the 2, then it really helps it stabilize. And you can feel free to experiment and see what you prefer. Sometimes I'll do 3 or more rotations. So, and then I'm flipping the project. 1. Come in through the middle and flipping the project. And it's just now this repetitive act of wrapping, flipping, coming around. You want to make sure that you maintain that figure 8 pattern, because otherwise it'll become a little bit of a ladder stitch. If I didn't cross, like do the figure 8, it would be wrapping it like this, which could be what you're going for, but it's a very different look, see? So we can wrap, wrap. And so I'm going to continue doing this until I get possibly to like the halfway point. And at some point we're going to have to decide which side is going to be the front and which side is going to be the back. And that's going to be influencing my placement of this gem. And actually whether or not I even put it on there. I may put it on after the fact. That way it has a solid wrapping behind it. And we'll see if we even need it or not. So, I'm going to continue this until I've filled up this entire little like leaf petal shape. And we'll want to be really careful on the decrease that it doesn't get all stretched out. But if I start having problems with that, I'll meet y'all right back here. But we'll just continue that weave. So here I've woven it, and I started to get a little bit of spreading up at the top, but sometimes that can't be helped. It just adds to the natural look of the piece, I guess. And I was able to maintain a nice little hole down there at the bottom. If you wanted a smaller hole, we would have done fewer coils initially, and that would have kind of compressed that down. So now I need to go ahead and shape the heart part before I start attaching our little keyhole component. So I'm going to use this round cutter to do our shaping, but I also want to be able to establish how far along the wire I am. So I'm actually going to be using this Sharpie marker, And we're going to want to delineate probably every inch. So I'm going to start at about here. It shouldn't go any further than that. I'm sure I'll go ahead and the Sharpie will rub off pretty easily, so you don't have to worry about having all of these dark marks on your work. But this is really going to help us as it kind of goes along. There we go. Okay. And so now I'm going to start the bend at this 2-inch mark. Oh, that's a little far in. I'll do it at like 1.5 inches. That's where I'm gripping it to our circle and then bringing it around. And then I'm just going to offset it to the side so that it sits like that. So now, coming around, holding it at 1.5 inches, folding it around. There we are. Okay, and so now we can actually see and line those 2 marks up, and we should have a relatively symmetrical, theoretically symmetrical, heart. That's pretty big though. Like, that's pretty honkin' huge. So I'm actually going to bring it in a little bit by holding here on these 2 and holding there, keeping these lined up, and I'm actually going to just pull down and in. And that's still giving us a really wide heart, but it's not quite so giant anymore. And if you don't want such a wide heart shape, I'm going to take this little organizer, and I'm going to come in and just round it out a little bit. That's something that's really nice about this soft aluminum, is you can really get in there and reshape this stuff. And so now that's filled it out a little bit more to a nice shape. And you can just tweak it to however you like. You could do however giant or however small of a heart as you want. Now also, this wire, I can't emphasize just how soft it is. So I'm actually going to be going through the jeweler's hammer. Let me find my jeweler's hammer, then I'll meet you all right back here. Okay, so I found my jeweler's hammer. It has a nylon head and a brass head. I really like the nylon head end. And if you ever have problems with the head like wiggling around on you, this one has detachable. And you can see I actually have a little ring in there. It seems like I need another one though. So I'm just going to place in another chainmail ring. And now whenever I tighten it, no wiggling. It's also not completely flat, but you know, pick our battles. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm on a ceramic tile base. That should be plenty. This is going to be pretty loud, but also you'll notice I have this flipped over. This is going to be the back side, I've decided. Now this is acting to work harden it. And also you'll notice if you start from this end and hammer around that way, you'll want to start from this end and hammer around that way as opposed to starting here and hammering around. Just in efforts to try to keep everything, again, symmetrical. So there we are. Just kind of tweaking everything up together. And now I'm actually going to come out 1 inch further. I think just a 1/2 inch actually. And I'm going to mark right where it's crossing right there. Putting the cap back on. And now this is going to be where going to have the bend happen. So I'm gripping very, very firmly and folding this around, and you'll notice this is a very thin tipped flat nose plier. That comes in very handy because I can fold it around and it's taking up very little actual space between the wires. And so I'm going to do that on both sides. Gripping right on and above would give us a different effect. So here we are. There we go. So you can see it bent down a little bit, but I'm going to bend on and above it. And now folding very firmly. There we go. And so now from here, to give us more working room, I'm actually just bending that open a bit. I'm going to come in with our bent nose pliers, and I'm just squeezing those tips together. You're going to be very careful when you do this to not get a twist. Sometimes something that can help will be gripping it with one pair of pliers and then squeezing it with another to try to keep any kind of twist or torque happening. So there we are with that. Now, keeping these ends very lined up, I'm actually going to come up here and trim these to the same length because it's going to become increasingly difficult to measure as we make more curves. That's a little too big of a circle, and this might be a little too small of a circle, but I'm going to go ahead and use this to start with as our mandrel. And I'm going to start with this lined up with that inch mark. So really, it's not horribly important. Just doing a loop, coming over here, doing a loop. And that would give us very big, like, loopy petals to our heart, for lack of a better term. And I'm just opening this back up. That one was just a little too small. I'm looking around me to see if I don't have something. Here's the head of a leaking liquid polymer clay bottle. Go figure. Yeah, that seems like a much better size. So this is as scientific and high-tech as I get with mandrels. It's like, here's a bottle. That'll work. Yeah, I like that size better. So I'm just coming in, open it up some, and smushing it back down. Fortunately, I didn't really need to use this paper anymore because it is all covered in liquid polymer clay. So, to keep from making a giant mess, this is now just going to get set off to the side. So yeah, that shaping's working out pretty well for me. I like it. And now I'll be taking our round nose pliers, and this is another instance where we're posed with a little bit of a difficulty getting this to twist into a spiral without making it twist. Now also, I'm kind of looking at this and I'm like, do I even need that spiral up top? I mean, I don't want to cover up the hole of the key. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that spiral. And so I'm just gripping it like this and very gently encouraging it around. And we're going to start with just that one rotation. I'm gripping it And oh, I hope I can do that again. This is another instance where using my finger as a work surface to function on kind of helps me to keep everything nice and flat. And you can see it can be a little hard on your hands, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. The thing is that I'd like to instill in myself and in everyone is that even if it's not easy, you can do it. You can find a way, you can make it work. Okay, so I'm going to try in for symmetry. So there's that. And really, we could have front or back go either way at this point. I mean, the only time it's been really decided is whichever side we attach this to. That'll kind of really influence which way's which. And now on these ends, I'm actually going to take my fine-tipped round nose pliers and I'm going to make a little spiral. Very tight little spiral. Because that's going to get hidden behind this and help us bind this end off. And so we're going to come through and do that on the other side. There we go. Just trying to deepen the curves, let it kind of, if I do something to one side, I try to immediately do it to the other and then tweak it and get these steps to be perfectly symmetrical each step of the way, because it's a lot easier, for me at least, to do that than it is to completely do one side and then be like, how did I get there? So again, this step does not look symmetrical to the other step, but I kind of like that one better. So let me see if I can't open this guy up a bit and deepen him down more. Sometimes they just aren't going to look the same, in which case, thank goodness, it's going to be hidden behind something. So now wrapping is going to get a little bit more difficult, because while we still have this nice opening here to be able to get this our wire through, that may not always be there. So kind of pressing that down. I don't want to go too much farther on this, because once I place this component in the front here, it's going to be very much in my way. So I'm going to just, and I still have a ton of wire attached here, but it's going to have to come off to the side. So now I'm going to try to rub this Sharpie marker off. You can see it rubs off quite easily. Just with your fingertip. No chemicals or anything. I'm sure you could use something to get it to come off a little better, but I don't know, of course that one's not wanting to come off. It's all stuck in a crack. There it goes. Okay, so now I'm going to pull off a whole nother arm span of this titanium colored silver plated copper core wire. If you're doing this with a sterling silver or a silver filled or something, you know, Argentinium, I would recommend dead soft. Okay, so also don't hesitate to give yourself a little bit of a bend, a little bit of a clean opening, and I'm going to start wrapping, I think on this side. Just holding that right here. And I'm going to wrap once, 2, 3, 4, 5. Compress that down with my fingernails. I do want it to be very symmetrical, so I am going to just trim that tail off. And then I'm going to bend this down. I like to clean up my loose ends as I make them, because you never know how it might be buried later on in the project. And with this thinner wire, I especially like doing at least 5 rotations, because that way I can tug on it without it unwrapping itself. So I'm going to try to keep those 2 wires from getting tangled around each other. And I'm pressing it in just as deep as I can. And I'm going to start wire wrapping. 1, 2, then up from behind. And pushing through. Keeping it nice and snug. Wanting to maintain the distance that I've established. Then coming through, 1, 2. And you'll notice I don't find the tip of my wire and use that as a needle. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit for you guys. I'm actually pushing up and then pulling through. And that way the majority of my work hardening that's happening is happening in a place that's very soon going to be done being wrapped. It's going to be on there. And it saves, hopefully the intent is to save the rest of my length of wire to be still nice and soft and supple. And so I'm just weaving a bit and then smooshing it down with my finger, and there's a kitten visiting me. She saw the tail of my wire. So it's always nice to have a furred friend help you wire up. Also, if you get tooth and claw marks in your wire, nylon gel pliers. They're a kitty crafter's best friend. And so I'm going to just continue this around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get about 1 centimeter woven. And then I'm going to start it on the other side. So I'm going to get that far, like probably out to like right here, right to where that expansion starts to happen. And then I'll meet you all right back here. So I've gotten this far on each side. To maintain symmetry, I'm counting the pairs of 2 that I had done. And now I've gotten as far as I like. And that was like 7 repetitions of the figure 8 pattern. Just for those of y'all who are interested. And now I'm going to start doing a repetition of 3 because we're starting to get a little bit stronger of a curve here. So that's 1 and 2 and 3. I'm going to compress that down in my fingers, and then I'm going to go 1 and 2. So this is time consuming, but I think it's going to be totally worth it, y'all. And I'm probably going to do like maybe another centimeter's worth of repetitions of 3 on this side and 2 on this side before expanding to where I'm doing 4 on this side and 2 on this side. So I'm going to work my way out about 2 centimeters on each side. I'm going to do 1 centimeter on this side, then 1 centimeter here, and then 1 more, and then I'll meet y'all right back here again. So here you can see I actually redrew a little bit more of a template. That way I can hold it up and see the shape that I want to kind of happen. And that way I can flip it over and keep that shape going on the other side. Now, I continued around a little farther than I said I would. We did the repetitions of 2 on each side, and then 3, and then 2, and then I got about this far out and I started doing 4 and 2. And you can see that gave us a really nice kind of gradient and growth coming around. and I've gotten to where I once it gets to, you know, under 3 inches, it's really hard to grip and manage and kind of wrap. Well, rather, it's not as easy as I would like it to be. So I'm leaving that tail there, and I'm going to continue this side around, and then I'm going to come back and show y'all how to splice in a fresh piece of wire, because we are definitely going to need more wire to get us through to the other side. But so far, I'm liking how it's coming along, so that's pretty neat. Also, something that keeps happening that I think I'm going to incorporate into the design is that kind of two-dimensional pushing one side forward from the other. I really like that. That wasn't intended initially in the design, but I think it's so pretty that I'm gonna do that. So again, I'm gonna keep kind of going around, probably 4 repetitions on the outside and 2 on the inside to about here, and then 3 and 2, and then 2 and 2. So also this side straightened a little bit more on there, so I'll be kind of pinching and tucking and shaping to try to get these 2 sides to be as absolutely symmetrical as possible. So yeah, just keep on weaving and I'll meet y'all right back here. So I've come around. I went ahead and added in a bit on this side so that you could see what the next step was. But whenever you've reached to where you only have a little bit left, I'm actually going to bring it up, continuing that figure 8 pattern, and I'm going to do 2 stitches. There's 1, and I want to do them very snug and even. And there's 2. And if you have a hard time gripping it with your fingers, just grab a pair of pliers, hold your core wire, and tighten it down a bit. And now, to follow along as though it were a continuation of the wire, I'm just inserting the tail of a new length. And this one was a full arm span of wire off the spool. And now I'm going to do 2 more stitches. So there's 1. And there's 2. And I'm going to tighten these down. I leave that tail on there because it's going to give me something to hold on to generate that tension to keep this nice and snug and even. Excuse me. And so now I'm going to go around, continuing that figure 8 pattern for 1. See how if I pull, it moves that wire? That's why that wire's there, because if I pulled too hard and that tail weren't there, it would just undo those stitches. So there's 1 and 2. And now I'm going to continue around until we're at the kind of, if this is the vertical axis and this is the horizontal axis. Sorry, that's a hard word apparently. I'm going to keep going to there, doing 4 on the outside and 2 on the inside, and then I'll have decreased from 3 to 2. Just bringing it around until I've reached the end. I'll probably only do 1.5 centimeters of the 3-2 figure 8 weave, and then the last of it I'll finish off with just a 2-2 weave. So we'll keep weaving that and I'll meet you all right back here. So I've come along, matched up to the other side, and I think I'm very good now to be able to come in with my flush cutters and snip and snip. And then I'm going to use bent nose pliers to do my best to smush those little tails down. Now in a perfect world I would be able to just like solder them or something, but this will do. Because the odds of that those 2 individual little wires getting specifically snagged and tugged to the exclusion of all others is very minimal. Feeling, making sure that there's no rough edges. It looks and feels pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to keep continuing to weave around on both sides. At this point I've reached the end of my 4 on the outside, 2 on the inside rotation, and I'm just doing 3 and 2 and then 2-2 for the last centimeter. And then we'll get to start working on continuing the design from there. So here you can see we've gotten completely down, and it's not perfectly symmetrical, but we'll figure it out. This side I have pushed through this center spirally part to give it some really nice three-dimensional look as opposed to the flat side. And the way that I did that is I'm just taking it and bracing my thumbs against this outer wire and then pushing. And you want to be gentle with it, because if you're too extreme, you're going to warp and distort things. But we're just getting that kind of pushed out on both sides. Try to make sure it's nice and symmetrical. And that's how that looks. And that gives us kind of a really nice effect, I think. I mean, if it's not what you're going for, then don't do it. And if you do it and decide that you don't like it, it's as easy as just kind of forcing it back in. But it does kind of distort a little bit, so I wouldn't do it over and over and over and over again to try to, you know, like kind of try it out, see what you think, and then leave it at that. There we go. So now I'm just tweaking these different parts. Now we'll be taking this piece and I'm going to try to decide. I need this bottom part here to be stabilized, so I am actually going to just wrap around, and let me zoom in for you a bit so you can see much better what's going on. See how there's that little ridge right between those two decorative bumps? I'm just going to go like that. Twist this around, try to hold that down with my thumb, and then just coming in between this component and the heart. I'm afraid I may have zoomed in too far. There we go. So now it's just right there. And now I'm going to wrap again around that bump. Just trying to make it as stable as I can. And I realize that that isn't like, that alone is not going to hold the world together. But steps in the right direction. So let me zoom back out for you. I'm also going to do another rotation between our keyhole and our wire wrapping, just to try to ground it down a little bit more. And now I'm also going to do a few rotations, just like 3, just enough to stabilize it. 1 and 2. Whoops. Oh, and it gets to be a tangly mess, it really does. And not to sound superstitious, but I really think the wire can tell when you're frustrated, because it will just keep kinking and making you really mad. So if you're finding yourself frustrated with yourself or frustrated with a project, set it down, walk away for a little bit. And sometimes that's not the thing that you want to do, but sometimes that's the only thing to do to keep it from getting messy. Because the last thing you want to do out of frustration is ruin all of the hard work you've already put into something. So I'm going to set this down, and I am going to actually pull off another full arm span of the 28 gauge titanium colored silver wire. Snipping it, boop, just like that. And I am going to thread on this looks to be a small, maybe not a 5mm, but it's not the biggest 6mm bead I've ever seen. These garnet that I'm using are hand cut, so not by me, but I purchased them and it said that they're hand cut, so they come out a little bit more irregular than other beads that I've seen. So I'm just going to set this here because I think I'm going to want that centered up. And actually, I have an idea about stabilizing this that I want to try. So I'm going to set that bead there. So I'm thinking if we hook around behind this nub and then feed the two ends of our wire through the keyhole. And this is just me messing around. This may not work out too well, but try to keep the wire from kinking. If you can stop it here before it becomes a full-on kink, you'll maintain the integrity of your wire for much longer. Okay, so I'm going to keep on pulling through. I'm going to push that back, I'm going to pull it down. There we are. So you can see that's actually holding on quite nicely and in a way that isn't necessarily disruptive to the look of the piece. Now something that I'm going to try to do though is thread these same two wires. So we're making a little lark's head knot. Trying to get both wires through that loop. There we are. And then tightening it down onto itself. Again, you want to make sure that it's not going to kink. And then just tighten it. Oh yeah, that's awesome. And so now, fortunately, the holes on this garnet bead are large enough that we can just slip both wires through our bead. Slide it down. Okay, and now, without paying too much heed to which side was originally on which side, I'm going to be splitting this like little antennae. One going one way, one going the other. No, I'm not. I'm going to put on another bead first. I'm looking for a 3mm silver bead. I think that'd look nice. Maybe? Before I've changed my mind again. So before I've removed that garnet bead, and I'm going to come through and I'm going to just slip this through the weaving that we've done. And this is actually going to give us the possibility of more stabilization. I'm going to try to have it be symmetrical, but keeping that wire from kinking if we can manage it. Okay, so that's cool that that's happening. So I'm going to pull this through to the front, and now I'm going to slide this garnet bead on there. And I want it to have landed where it would have landed had I not done that stabilization step anyways. So there we are. It's just sitting like that. Kind of get that out of the way. Yeah, I'm gonna slide on a 3mm, or maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna go with a small bead first. One of the benefits of using the super thin 28 gauge wire is I am actually able to slide it through. Okay, excellent. So now, disregarding which side was originally which, I'm just going to come through, bead through the back side, towards the front. And on this side, feeding through the back side towards the front. So there we are. It kind of looks like it's actually splitting the wires more than I wanted it to. So I'm going to reposition that one and hope that the wires will settle back into how they were. So I'm actually going to take a little porcupine quill and try to just relax them back over. And I'm going to go up one. Oops. Well, I guess it did a good job of relaxing back over because now I can't find it. I think I might have just threaded it through the same spot. We'll see how it behaves. Okay, there we go. Coming at a very similar placement. Now I'm going to continue around. I'm going to thread on a very small, like I think this is like a 2mm, a 3mm, and then here I have some little garnets in a bead tray I made, and then a 4mm. You know, these 4mm garnet look an awful lot like the 3mm garnet, or 3mm silver, so I'm just going to go from the 2mm to the, where are you at, home? There you are. And then add on another little one. There we go. Let that slide on down. And I'm going to try to do a bit of a picot edge. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Threading it in from the back. Again, doing a little bit of a whip stitch border. There just happens to be beads on it. Now, it's a really good idea when you're doing this to do a stabilization stitch. You don't want to do just a single, like, whip, whip, whip all the way around. If you add in that stabilizer, then you're going to have much better luck with these beads not getting floppy. So already with that right there, this is much more stable than what it had been. But I'm going to continue this pattern all the way around the edge. So let's see. Oh, spilled my little beads. Of course I did. So I'm going to put on a small bead. Then I'm going to put on a garnet bead. I don't know, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this, but just in case I haven't, there will be a list of the tools and materials linked down below to where you can go and purchase them. Then I'm going to slide down, boop. And now I'm going to count, almost like counting cross stitch. 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, and on the 5th. And really, I just do this for myself, the counting and things. It's not really very important. It's more important that you like the way that it looks and you like the placement. But I'm just trying to get a nice lacy effect here on this one without being too disruptive to the original weaving, if that can be managed. And if it can't, then oh well. Yeah, there's a lot that can be accomplished with just kind of going back in between things and sorting them out with either a needle tool or a porcupine quill, if that's what you have. I really like the porcupine quills. They're very lightweight. They're differently colored so that I can they don't just blend in with all of my other tools. And they're surprisingly durable without being able to scratch the enamel on any of the wire or stones or polymer clay. It probably could. If I tried really hard, I could probably scratch the surface of the polymer clay beads with them, but I'd really have to be trying. Okay, now this one's sitting much closer to that one than it did to the previous one. I don't know if I like that look better. So I think what I'm going to do is actually just slide that right off. Don't ever be afraid to remove something to like a Control-Z a step. It's not always that easy, but to just kind of be like, you know, that's not my favorite. Let's try something else. So now I'm going to rethread those beads on. And again, if you see your wire do this, don't just pull on through. Go ahead and take a minute to give it some attention, straighten it out, and then bring it back down. Go on the next stitch over. And I'm just going to kind of continue around. Take it and straighten it into a nice little picot edge. And continue this nice lacy edging. I had thought about increasing up to a 6mm bead on the trim, but I don't think that'll be necessary. I think I'll stick to just the 4mm edging, so I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I'll meet you all right back here. So I've come around. I have 11 repetitions of the pattern on this side, so I'm going to try my best to have 11 complete repetitions on this side as well. But down here the weaving gets a little dense, so if you're having problems getting your wire through, I just kind of spread it a bit with my fingernails and try my best to encourage it through. You don't want to force it because then you'll start getting the little bends and stuff. So just try your best to get in there, split those wires apart, and then feed it through. And whenever it's not cooperating well, you know, whenever it's nice and dense like that, I don't worry so much about doing the second stitch, the stabilizing stitch, just because it's almost more trouble, I feel, than it's worth. 8, 9. So now I've got to fit 2 more in there, but I feel like I've made this a little too dense. But we'll play it by ear and see how it goes. I should have followed my own advice and done it one side then the other, then one side and then the other, but I got carried away. I liked the repetition of just doing the whip stitch edge. There we go, threading that on. Now we also have quite a bit of wire. Like, this was the 5th wire coming off the bottom of this project. So I'm going to make sure that this one's out of the way, the one that's left over from us doing all the weaving. Try my best to not lasso around the rest of the project. Now here I'm definitely going to make sure to do the stabilizing stitch because there's no weaving to add any friction or anything like that. So this will be the last one. Threading those beads on, threading on another garnet, threading another bead on, letting it slide down to the end, and one and two for the stabilizing wire. Oops, and I have successfully popped that out of its base. So now we know that that is not as secure as we would like it to be. So those wires, if anything, are almost more decorative than stabilizing. Okay, what to do now? So now I'm going to take these wires that are coming off from where we were doing the weaving. I'm going to thread up from behind. And you can customize this to whatever component you're using, whether it's a filigree piece or whether it's a keyhole like this. This technique and concept isn't specific to just this style. You could do a lot of different things with this. And so if you see, I've just stabilized right there. And now I'm going to come up through the back side here. Go around once and twice, 2 full rotations, and then this will give us 3, and this will give us 4, and this will give us 5 little stabilized wires. And that's very nice. And so now I'm going to make my way right back down through this hole right there. Like I've got these 2 holes right there and right there, so I'm going to thread through this one. Oh, I'm not even on camera, there we go. But you can see on the front side, it's these 2 holes. So I'm going to thread through this one, keeping it quite snug if I can help it. Then I'm going to feed through that one. So on the front, that's happening. It's very subtle, which is nice. And I'm debating, do I want another 6mm bead right there? I do think that'd look really nice. So I'm going to set this down and I'm going to thread on the 6mm bead. Bring it all the way down. Let it kind of sit. I do like that. Just a little bit to fill in. And now, without compressing the picot edge that we've done, I'm just going to thread around. Again, essay without compressing the picot edge. And you can see this is pushing it into a kink. I really don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to twist it out. Sorry, I'll zoom out a little bit more for you. There we go. That way I'll be less likely to go off camera. It still happens despite my best efforts. Can I fit this through there, I wonder? In today's edition of Will It Fit, it will not. So I'm just going to kind of continue around. And so now also getting another kink out of the wire. There's still a little bit more movement maybe than I would like. Because ideally I would like no movement. So I'm actually going to feed up from behind through this same original hole. And I'm actually going to try to snag that little wire. Help tighten everything down. Pull it through. And then, how would that work? Threading through the front there. I'm interested to see where this wire will want to naturally lay. And I think that's acceptable. Right there like that. Now with just a little bit of encouraging, we almost be able to get it. Uh-oh, which wire? There. It's this wire. Okay. I was like, ruh-roh. So now I get to do that same thing, or try to, on the other side. Again, should have taken my own device and done this side symmetrically, but I got kind of carried away in the process. So, coming from the back, beading up through here, and down through here, let's flip it over to see where we're at. Okay, and now we're going to rotate 5 times around. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. There's 4. There's 5. And now we're going to feed through right there. Really, this isn't particularly important so long as you make each side as symmetrical as you would like it to be, or as asymmetrical. Just have it be, again, however you would like it to be. Through there. Let me get this spiral out of the way a little bit. Because while I do want it to be symmetrical to the other side it was not showing. So now, grabbing up a 6mm bead, threading it onto our wire. Looping it around. Sorry, didn't mean to go off camera there. Okay, coming around, same as we did before. There we go. Okay, so now it really seems like it's going to become a case of just trying to finish these loose ends. So let's get on with that. I think this one I'm going to have wrap around the opposite side to maintain that tension. Tight. I'm going to do at least 5 repetitions, because especially with this softer wire, like this soft thin wire, more is better. 2. 3. And if you're having problems getting it to loop through, you can just pull it towards the back first and then insert it towards the front. So that would be 4. And then 1 more. There we are. And so I'm going to snip quite as close as I can, save that scrap wire, and then come in with my bent nose pliers and press it flush. Make sure there's no snaggy bits. And so now this wire that was coming in from the other side is going to get wrapped around, but first I'm going to wrap around this end. Is wiggling around a bit more than I want it to. Oh, and everything's starting to get to be a kinked up mess too. So just stitching it through, pulling through. Now I'm trying to figure out which ones go to which ends. Let's see. Okay, so this one went to this side edging. So I'm going to get it bound off before we go too much further. And I do want this nice and stably bound off. Fortunately, I think I did a few rotations already. So I think 1 more should do us. There we go. And if you ever don't think you're going to be able to cut the wire safely, see how I've just snipped a bit, and I'm going to come in with my round nose pliers, make a super cute little spiral. And we can just nestle that down in and among everything. And it'll be just fine right there. So now we're almost done binding off the wires. I keep getting little tangles and it's driving me mad. I could trim them back, but then I'm afraid I would just regret it. This one here is what I wrapped this piece with. So I'm going to do a few more rotations with this one. Oops. Oh, look at that. I've caught a pair of pliers and hit the camera. A good fortune. And made a kink. I'll be darned. Just like how I said the wire knows when you get frustrated, the wire knows whenever you're excited to be done with it. And it's like, nuh-uh. Boom, complicated. Okay. So, snip. Get that one up out the way. Press that down flush with our bent nose pliers. What on earth happened? How did I get tangled? There we go. Oh no. Well, that's that, I guess. Porcupine quill to the rescue! I hooked around my wire that I wanted to keep nice and stable. Porcupine quill won't quite do the trick, so I'm going to see if I can't pinch and pull it. There we go. Oh man, that's all kinds of bent up now. Okay, try that again. And so now I'm going to bring both of these forward. Both of these wires, trim off their raw ends. And I'm going to feed through a 2mm, a 3mm, and a 6mm bead. And let those slide down. See how they look. I like it better without the 3mm actually. You never know until you try. Okay. So I'm going to feed these back through the 6mm. Yep, just like that. And I think I'm going to do another wee bitty bead on the end. I think I like that. I like that a lot. And now I'm going to feed this through that hole that we made. Well, it's not a hole because nothing's missing. It's a space that we left. or no, hole implies that we cut something out, and we'd been planning that since the beginning. That's the one thing I will claim is actually planned, was this hole. Okay, and then I'm going to go and squeeze down quite tight, that way it'll get it nestled in among the other wires. There we go. Then I'm going to stitch down this side as well. Okay. And I'll trim those off nice and flush. I'm really liking how that's looking, y'all. And again, we can kind of push this, make sure it's all shaped nicely. Trim it. And come through and tuck those loose ends as best we can. So it's going to be very important with where this sits on a person's neck. There we go. Making sure there's no rough parts. There we go. And if you're ever having a significant amount of trouble with it, you can always bring in your nylon jaw pliers and squish it down. That kind of always acts to get everything where it's supposed to go. So now I am going to make this part, which is going to be just a little segment of our 28 gauge wire. With a 4mm bead strung on it. Find the center point, bring it on back. And I'm going to try really hard to keep that centered as I thread the two ends through the middle there, and then pull. And what I mean by that is how there's some silver showing on this side, but not on that side. I want them to be even. So you may need to pull it out some, pull down on the other side. Okay. And then we're going to come up and around, and I'm going to do 5 rotations on each side. So there's 1. I may do more if I like the way it looks. 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we are. So now I'm going to snip that and snip that and try my best to get it all nice and smushed down. Smush that, do 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 do. Smush that, do 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 do. Smush that, do 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 do. Smush that. Ooh. Yep, that just happened. I'm so sorry. Okay, so no pokey bits. Nice and symmetrical. And so now I'm going to make 3 bead links with the 6mm beads, one that will go to connect these 2 pieces, and then one that will go on each side to connect this to some chain. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll meet you all right back here. So I decided to use some 20 gauge copper core parawire to make a wrapped loop, and so to demonstrate that, I'm giving myself about 1.5 inches, doing a 90-degree bend, wrapping it around the nose of my pliers to make a little loop like that. And I'm holding that loop with my pliers. I'm just going to twist this around our wire, and now I'm going to snip it as close as I can. I'm also going to try to smush it nice and tight together. I'm going to push all of our beads up as close as I can to our loop, and I'm going to, a few millimeters away from the end of the bead, do another 90-degree bend and repeat those same motions. Oh. And right now I'm working off the spool, so all this wire is still attached to the spool, which is why it's flopping around like crazy. But I feel like it lets me have a little less waste than what I might have otherwise. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of smush down on this little end. There we go. So there we have a wrapped loop. Set that spool of wire off to the side. And now I'm going to come through, and I have some stainless steel 20 gauge 1/8 inch rings that are opened, and I'm just going to hook through our little key here. I wasn't initially going to do this. I was going to do another garnet link. Oops. But I decided I wanted it a little denser together, so I'm actually going to open this quite generously, very wide. That way we can comfortably get it through right there, and then right there. Hopefully this will be a large enough ring that they can no, it doesn't look like they're going to be comfortable neighbors, so I'll actually need a larger ring than that, which I think works out to our benefit. Here I have some steel cut stainless steel 16 gauge 1/8 inch, and I'm going to pull two of them out, but also keep the package open off to the side. Now these are going to be quite difficult to open. A much thicker gauge. There we go. You can definitely feel it in your hands. Oh, and I just spilled a bunch of beads. Second time today. It's a good day for spilling beads, I guess. Let me pick those up real quick. Not like they're silver beads or anything, and it's not like I just tipped the package over again. Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm going to take this, thread it through, making sure it's facing properly. We're going to hook the key on. Then I'm going to close it just as best as I can. Making sure there's no little loose ends or burrs or anything. And one here will be plenty, I do think. So, oops. So now, I think I'm actually going to pull out a second one. This one's already open. That's that. Okay. I'm going to pull out a second ring, and I'm going to open both of these. And I'm going to count out 2, 3, 4 repetitions of the picot edge before hooking a ring through and putting a bead link on. You could actually, I don't know if you saw that, but it actually twisted up the ends of my pliers. So I'm going to grab some thicker jawed pliers and get a nice, good closure there. And that's how I have those joined. So now I'm going to do the other side. And I will use these smaller stainless steel rings to attach these to. I don't know yet if I'm going to do more bead links, if I'm going to attach it to some chain or what. So, stay tuned. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just hook through right there. Looks pretty good. Close that. Now there we have now that's really kind of disrupted our nice even layout and weaving of wire. I don't guess it can be helped too much, but I think it'll be alright. So there we are. Now to finish this necklace, I would attach either chain or cord or more bead links or more wire wrapped components, or just really whatever we want to get this to be however long or short as we would like. But I really like the idea of attaching this to just a really nice chain, like a silver chain. That way it won't distract too much from an already complex necklace. Hey y'all, thanks so much for hanging out with me for this tutorial. I do hope that it was helpful to you. It was really nice to get to recreate this piece. I think it's always a good idea to go back and revisit your older work, either to try to recreate it or to try to, maybe if that first time it just wasn't matching what was going on in your head, never hurts to go back and try it again. I think this time round this was much tidier. There were still some messy spots, but for the most part it was a lot tidier. My hands still probably hurt just as bad as they did the first and second time. But I'm really excited to have gotten to share the process with you guys. So if you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave them down below. If you follow along with this and have pictures that you would like to share of things that you have made, you can tag me on Instagram or you can share it to my Facebook wall. And then also, if you enjoy my free tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, please consider joining me on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can keep these daily tutorials coming, as well as participating in our weekly fairy house giveaways that we have now. It's not always a fairy house, but it happens every Tuesday during my live stream at 2 p.m. Central Time, roughly. Sometimes I'm a little early, sometimes I'm a little late, but it will happen on Tuesdays. So, or at least it's been happening on Tuesdays. And then also I do monthly craft crates, so if you'd like to get your hands on some new materials, some handmade cabochons, like you can actually see behind me a little batch of handmade turquoise, faux turquoise cabochons that I still need to sand and finish up for this month's Patreon packages. But we do the craft crates, we do digital download content, we do behind the scenes videos, all sorts of different stuff at our Patreon page. And also, you don't even have to be a pledger to see some of the things that we post as well, but some of it is exclusive just to the Patreon site, so you don't even have to have pledged anything. You just follow us and you can see pictures that you won't see anywhere else on the internet of like my cat sitting on my work or something. So but thanks again guys for hanging out with me. I'll see y'all in my next video, and until then, happy crafting. Bye.